The sun hadn't quite broken over the jagged ridges of Lamar Valley, but the sky was already beginning to shift. That soft, pale light of early spring stretched across the land like a whispered promise. Snow still clung stubbornly to the slopes, packed into the folds of the mountains, but the lower meadows were shedding their winter skin. Thin layers of mist rose from the thawing ground, drifting over the sagebrush like ghosts reluctant to leave. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet Clara Whitmore had come to love in her years as a wildlife photographer. This was different. It was a stillness that felt heavy, as if the entire landscape was holding its breath. Inside a modest wood frame cabin just outside the park boundary, Clara stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the trees sway just slightly in the breeze. At 29, she had spent more time in the wilderness than most people twice her age. Her hair, the color of autumn leaves, was pulled into a loose bun, freckles scattered across her nose like the constellations she often watched through her camera lens. Her green eyes were tired, but alert, always scanning, always waiting for something to happen. She had come to Yellowstone to reset. Too many late nights in editing suites, too many interviews, too much noise. She'd chased storms in Colorado, filmed whales off the coast of Oregon, and once spent 10 days alone in a hide in the Everglades. But nothing called to her like Yellowstone did. Clara packed light. Her Nikon Z9 hung from her shoulder like a trusted friend, and her gear sat prepped and ready by the door, just the essentials: wide-angle lens, thermal scope, energy bars, bear spray, and a worn field notebook filled with sketches, timestamps, and questions no one had answered yet. She wasn't here for a paycheck this time. She was here because something in her gut told her to be. Yellowstone wasn't just a national park, it was a pulse, a living thing, and she'd learned to trust when the land whispered, even if she couldn't understand what it was saying. The ranger station's weather report had mentioned early morning fog and below freezing temperatures, but the air felt different. Denser. More alert. Outside, the forest sat still. No calls of ravens. No echoing bugles from distant elk. Not even the scurry of squirrels among the pines. Clara squinted into the trees and felt the hairs on her arms rise. She didn't know why yet, but she felt it. Deep down, beneath the frost and roots, something was stirring. She sipped her coffee, barely tasting it, and reached for her keys. The road to the interior of the park awaited, and so did the story she didn't know she was about to find. Not a headline. Not a shot for the portfolio. Something bigger. And it had already begun. The gravel crunched under the tires of Clara's black Subaru Outback as she turned off the access road and onto Highway 191. The rising sun finally crested the ridgeline, casting a golden wash across the treetops. In her rearview mirror, the distant peaks still slumbered in shadow, but ahead, Yellowstone began to glow. Clara rolled down her window, expecting to hear the familiar sounds of spring awakening, birdsong, the rustle of brush, the distant call of coyotes. But there was nothing. Just wind. And that silence again. Heavy. Unsettling. She slowed to a crawl. Her camera lay on the passenger seat, lens capped but ready. A part of her had been excited for this moment, the fresh light, the possibility of capturing wildlife crossing the road or grazing along the tree line. But something was off. That's when she saw him. A single bear. Massive. Alone. Still. He stood directly in the center of the highway, not 20 yards ahead. His fur shimmered with frost and age, a mix of black and silver that gave him a regal, almost mythic presence. He didn't move. Not toward her. Not away. Just watched. Clara eased her foot onto the brake, letting the car roll to a soft stop. Her breath caught. There was no fear, not yet. Just awe. She'd photographed bears before, grizzlies in the Tetons, black bears in North Carolina, but never like this. Never with this kind of presence. This wasn't a startled encounter or a passing glance from a curious animal. This was intentional. She reached for her camera, but something inside her stopped her short. This moment wasn't meant to be captured. It was meant to be witnessed. Then another bear stepped from the woods. And another. From the trees on both sides, they emerged, slowly, one by one, until the road wasn't a road anymore. It was a corridor of stillness, flanked by living statues. Black bears. Grizzlies. Older ones, younger ones. Each of them moving deliberately, then stopping. Forming a silent line, facing the same direction. Guarding something unseen. Clara's heart pounded. She'd read about animal migrations, about instinctual group behaviors. But bears didn't do this. Not together. Not like this. She glanced around. No other cars. No rangers. Just her and dozens of apex predators standing in synchronized silence beneath the rising sun. They weren't aggressive. They weren't confused. They were waiting. Clara felt the pull of something ancient pressing against her chest, a pressure she couldn't name. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. She didn't know what this was yet. But every cell in her body knew it mattered. And whatever was coming, the wild had sensed it first. By mid-morning, Clara had parked safely off the highway and was now tucked into a small rise overlooking the curve of the road. The bears remained, dozens of them, holding their positions like sentinels. They weren't scattered randomly across the landscape. They stood at intervals, spread evenly along the shoulder of Highway 191, near trailheads, beside steaming geysers, and even atop low ridgelines. Some lay down, their heads lifted and alert. Others paced slowly, circling the same small patches of ground like restless guards awaiting orders. Clara's fingers hovered over her camera again, but she still hadn't taken a single frame. She couldn't. There was something sacred about the stillness. Something fragile. It didn't feel like the right time to document. It felt like the right time to listen. She kept her distance, several hundred feet back, high enough on the slope that the bears wouldn't perceive her as a threat. Her field journal rested in her lap. She scribbled observations like she was afraid she might forget this was real. 10:17 a.m. 24 bears visible from ridge. Black bears and grizzlies. No sign of conflict or territorial posturing. All facing southeast. Behavior, calm. Intense. Unified. She looked up. Across the valley, a black bear with a scar down its left flank lay motionless on a flat rock, staring toward the treetops like it was waiting for a signal. Another bear, a younger grizzly, kept lifting its snout to the wind, then lowering it again, ears twitching. Clara reached for her radio scanner. Static. No ranger chatter yet. Then she saw the first truck. A green U.S. Park Service vehicle rolled up from the north. It stopped abruptly when it reached the first curve, its tires skidding slightly on the gravel. The ranger inside stayed in the cab for a moment, clearly stunned, before slowly stepping out with a radio in one hand and a camera in the other. Clara recognized him, Ranger Jake Morrison. Mid-40s, wide-shouldered, calm under pressure. She'd spoken with him during past visits. Jake walked toward one of the bears, not directly, but cautiously, stopping short about 20 feet away. The bear didn't flinch. Didn't growl. Just stared. Jake lifted his radio. Clara could barely hear his voice, but the tension in his shoulders told her everything. More vehicles appeared by mid-afternoon. Rangers, photographers, a few early-season tourists who had driven deep into the park before roadblocks could be set. They were stopped now, watching from behind car doors and ranger barricades, whispering as if they'd wandered into something ancient. Clara approached one of the rangers stationed behind an SUV near the junction. "You ever seen anything like this?" she asked.
The young ranger shook her head slowly. No, ma'am. Not even close. Bears don't move like this. Not in groups. Not this coordinated.
What are they doing? The ranger glanced toward the line. I don't think they're doing anything. Clara raised a brow. You mean they're just here?
I mean, the ranger said, they're watching. And that scares me more than if they were charging at us.
Clara stepped back toward her observation point, heart pounding. The temperature hadn't changed, but she pulled her jacket tighter anyway. The silence had deepened. The air felt like it was pushing inward from all directions. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't instinct gone awry. It was the first note in a song no one else could hear yet. And the wild had started to hum. As Clara sat back against the trunk of a lodgepole pine, notebook in her lap, a gust of cool wind stirred the hem of her jacket. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence press in, the weight of it not unfamiliar, but now layered with something deeper. Something remembered. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind, uninvited but welcome. When the earth stirs in her sleep, he used to say, the great watchers rise. Clara hadn't thought of that story in years. Not since she was a wide-eyed kid spending summers in rural Montana, listening to her grandfather spin tales by the fire, voice low and slow, as if the mountains themselves were listening in. He wasn't a man of science. He wasn't a man of much schooling, either. But he knew the land. He'd grown up in a cabin like hers, trapped game in the winter, tracked elk in the spring. And he believed, deeply, that animals knew things long before humans did. There's a rhythm to the land, he'd whisper. And the wild can hear when it skips. She remembered one story in particular. He called it the silence of the watchers. He described a time, long before memory, when the ground beneath the northern forests had begun to shift. The sky hadn't changed. The rivers still ran. But the animals felt it. The great bears, wolves, even the birds, they stopped. Held still. Stared into the horizon like they were waiting for something to rise. No one believed them. And then the mountain broke. Clara had laughed back then. She was 12, still clinging to logic, eager to grow up and dismiss anything that couldn't be measured or explained. But now? Now she sat in a valley where over 50 bears stood silent in formation. Where no bird sang. Where the forest listened harder than she'd ever known it could. She opened her eyes and stared back at the bears. A large black bear stood atop a slope, completely still, its fur rippling in the breeze. Watching. Waiting. Her grandfather's voice whispered once more. When the watchers rise, you listen. Not with your ears. With your whole being. Clara's hand gripped her notebook tighter. She wasn't here by accident. The land had called her. And maybe, just maybe, this time, she was ready to listen. As the sun dipped below the snow-brushed peaks, Yellowstone transformed. The golden light turned cool and blue, stretching shadows across the valley like ink poured slowly over parchment. And still, the bears didn't move. Clara set up her drone just as twilight settled in. She'd hesitated most of the day, not wanting to disturb whatever this was. But curiosity, and something deeper, a sense of responsibility, finally pushed her to launch it. The drone lifted quietly, its soft hum quickly drowned out by the breeze. Through her monitor, Clara watched as the world below opened into something surreal. The line of bears was no coincidence. They weren't scattered in confusion or gathered for safety. They were positioned, with precision. Along curves in the highway. Near trail junctions. Around geothermal vents and the edges of steaming geysers. Like guardians posted at gates. She adjusted the altitude, taking in a wider view. The formation resembled a crescent, anchored at both ends by larger grizzlies, Kale, still at the center, his silver-backed mass unmistakable even from the air. It was beautiful. And terrifying. Back at her car, Clara uploaded a short 30-second clip to her cloud drive and sent it to her producer in Denver. "No commentary," she typed. "Just watch this." She barely had time to review her notes before her phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. And again. Within the hour, the clip had been reposted on several wildlife forums, then picked up by a popular outdoor YouTube channel with millions of subscribers. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Bearwall. Hashtag Kale the Sentinel. Hashtag Yellowstone Guardians. The comment sections were a war zone of wonder and disbelief. Staged? No way. This is legit. Look at the bear spacing, almost geometric. Is Yellowstone about to blow? Guys, this is giving me chills. They're warning us. I swear. By the time midnight approached, the video had gone viral. And Clara couldn't sleep. She sat beside her campfire just outside the park's boundary, the screen of her laptop glowing against the darkness. The footage played on loop, and every time Kale came into frame, standing at the center of the crescent, unmoving, eyes fixed toward the horizon, Clara felt the same tight pull in her chest. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of what he knew. The bears hadn't arrived to panic. They hadn't roared or charged or run. They had assembled. Deliberately. Quietly. And somehow, all at once. She stared into the flickering fire and whispered, not to herself but to the night beyond the trees. "What are you trying to tell us?" Only the wind answered, rustling through pine needles like a breath caught in the lungs of the earth. The wild was awake. And the world was watching. Day 2, the tremors begin. Morning came with a pale, uncertain light. A fine frost coated Clara's windshield, crackling as she scraped it away with the edge of an old trail map. The air was colder than yesterday, sharper somehow, like it had something to say but didn't know how. She hadn't slept much. The viral drone footage had drawn in wildlife experts, amateur theorists, and doomsday bloggers by the thousands. Her inbox was overflowing, her phone battery dead by midnight. But none of that mattered now. Because the bears were still there. Every single one. Unmoved. Unbothered by the world exploding online. They stood in their positions like night had never passed. Like they were frozen in time. Clara climbed to the ridge again, this time with hot coffee and her notebook pressed tight under one arm. As she settled into her usual spot, something shifted beneath her. It was subtle, so faint she almost missed it. A sensation more than a sound. Like the land itself took a deep breath beneath her boots. She stood, frowning, then crouched down and pressed her hand flat against the soil. There it was again. A pulse. Not violent. Not enough to cause panic. But it was real. A few minutes later, she heard the crackle of a ranger's radio down near the road. She couldn't make out the words, but the ranger's sudden movement told her enough. Something had changed. Clara packed up and made her way down the hill to the closest checkpoint. Ranger Jake Morrison stood next to his vehicle, staring at a handheld seismic monitor that blinked quietly in his palm. "You felt that too?" she asked. He nodded, jaw tight. "Small tremor. Nothing serious. But it's the third one this morning." "Epicenter?" "Somewhere near the caldera." Clara's chest tightened. "You think this has to do with the bears?" Jake didn't answer right away. He looked out toward the tree line where Kale still stood like a statue. Then he said, "I think the bears already knew." The words echoed in Clara's mind as she returned to her vantage point. She scribbled furiously in her journal. 8:12 a.m. Ground tremors detected. Confirmed by park rangers. Bear formation remains unchanged. No panic. No retreat. Still facing southeast. She raised her camera, focusing on Cale. Even through the lens, he looked more like a figure from myth than a living creature, stoic, unwavering. Around him, the other bears continued their silent vigil. One younger grizzly lifted its head and sniffed the air. Another began to pace, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, then stopped, facing the same direction as the rest. Clara looked up to the ridgelines and noticed something else. No birds. Not one. The sky was still. Not even the wind moved the treetops. She scanned the horizon and felt her breath hitch. It wasn't just the bears anymore. Far off, on the next rise, a group of elk stood motionless. To her left, a lone fox crouched low behind a fallen log, eyes wide and fixed in the same direction. And just like that, the message became clearer. It wasn't just the bears who had felt it. The forest was listening. And now, Clara was too. Cale's gaze. By mid-morning, Clara found herself drawn closer to Cale. Not recklessly, she was no stranger to the risks of approaching a grizzly, especially one this massive, but there was something in his stillness that invited presence, not distance. She hiked a careful arc through the low trees, staying downwind, her movements slow and measured. No camera in hand. No sound but the crunch of frost beneath her boots. Every few steps, she paused, letting the forest speak in its silence. She wasn't sneaking, Cale already knew she was there. He stood just off the shoulder of the road, half shrouded by steam rising from a nearby thermal pool. His fur glistened with morning dew, and from this angle, Clara could see the intricate pattern of old scars along his left shoulder, wounds earned from a life of survival, maybe even leadership. Clara stopped about 60 yards away and crouched behind a rocky ledge. She didn't raise her camera. Instead, she just watched. Cale didn't look at her right away. His massive head remained turned southeast, toward the horizon. His body was so still that for a moment, Clara thought he might be asleep on his feet. But then, slowly, deliberately, he turned. His eyes met hers. Greenish-brown. Deep. Intelligent in a way she wasn't prepared for. It wasn't the look of a wild animal startled by a human. It was acknowledgement. A question without words. A connection that bypassed thought and logic. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The wind shifted slightly, carrying with it the faint scent of sulfur and pine. Somewhere in the distance, a geyser erupted with a sharp hiss, but neither of them flinched. They were suspended in something else entirely. Something old. Cale lowered his head slightly, then lifted his front left paw and placed it on the ground with exaggerated care. He held it there, firm, intentional. Then he stilled again. 6 seconds passed. 10. Then 20. And still he held the position. Clara's hand trembled as she scribbled in her notebook. 10:09 a.m., Cale looked directly at me. Placed paw on ground. Held contact for approximately 30 seconds. Behavior suggests awareness. Possibly signaling. Interpreting? Impossible to explain by known bear behavior. But she didn't need science to tell her what she felt. He wasn't performing. He wasn't warning her. He was showing her something. That the land wasn't just waking, it was speaking. Through instinct. Through presence. Through him. And she realized, with a strange clarity, that this moment wasn't just about Yellowstone. It wasn't even about the tremors or the bears. It was about us. Whether we still knew how to listen. Cale turned back toward the trees, resuming his watch. Clara stood slowly, heart thudding in her chest, and backed away the same way she'd come, never breaking eye contact until the trees swallowed her from his sight. Whatever message he was carrying. She'd heard it. And she'd never forget his gaze. Animals beyond bears join in. By early afternoon, it was no longer just the bears. Clara sat on a high bluff overlooking the southern bend of the valley, her notebook now thick with pencil marks, creases, and dirt-streaked fingerprints. What began as an inexplicable gathering of apex predators was evolving into something broader, something collective. She adjusted her binoculars and scanned the edges of the tree line, then froze. A group of elk, at least 7 of them, stood in a shallow meadow. They weren't grazing. They weren't moving. Just standing. Ears forward. Bodies rigid. All facing the same direction, southeast. The same direction as the bears. Clara flipped to a clean page and started scribbling. 1:42 p.m., elk herd observed. Same formation behavior. No movement. Not alarmed, but alert. Mirroring bear posture. What are they sensing? She scanned left and caught sight of a coyote. It was crouched low, almost hidden behind a ridge of rock, eyes sharp, tail low, as if it had stumbled into something sacred and didn't dare make a sound. And then, almost impossibly, a bald eagle circled overhead. Just once. Then it glided lower and landed on a barren branch directly above the field of elk. It didn't call. It didn't shift. It watched. Clara's heart raced. Something had changed. Whatever this was, it was spreading. Or maybe it had always been more than the bears. Maybe she had only just now started to see the full scope. She pulled out her satellite phone and called her friend and geophysicist, Dr. Maren Liu, in Boise. Maren had helped her interpret geothermal patterns during a shoot in Yellowstone the year before. Maren, Clara said, skipping hello, I need a favor. Can you check the pressure readings around the caldera? Something's happening here. Not just tremors, something broader. Animal behavior's off the charts. There was a pause. Then Maren's voice crackled back, tight and focused. You're not the first to call. We've seen minor shifts in magnetic readings near Norris Basin. Barely outside standard deviation, but enough to make my team sit up. Clara felt a chill creep down her spine. Clara, Maren added, quieter this time, if the animals are picking up on something before we do, you need to document everything. I am, Clara whispered. But it's more than data now. It's like the wild is trying to hold the line. Even the smallest creatures had gone quiet. Not out of fear. Out of reverence. And now, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just witnessing a phenomenon. They were part of it. Day 3 morning, the stirring. The third morning broke with an unease Clara could feel in her bones. The sky had turned a pale, washed-out gray, as if the sun had risen reluctantly. Frost clung to the edges of the pine needles, and a strange, metallic tang lingered in the air, something between ozone and sulfur. Clara stepped out of her tent just before 6 a.m., breath rising in clouds as she stood motionless, listening. Still no birds. Still no wind. But beneath her boots, the earth pulsed. Not violently, not like an earthquake. It was subtler, like the land was stretching from a long sleep. The ground shifted in the smallest of ways, a rolling motion, too soft to hear but impossible not to feel. She knelt and pressed her palm to the dirt. It vibrated, like a heartbeat. By the time Clara reached the ridge overlooking Highway 191, the ranger station had already begun setting up additional roadblocks. There were more personnel today, some from the U.S. Geological Survey, some from the Department of the Interior. No one wore panic on their faces, but Clara saw the tension in their movements. Radios clicked faster. Eyes scanned the horizon more often.
She joined Ranger Jake Morrison near a mobile monitoring van stationed by the west trailhead.
Readings? She asked, voice low. Jake nodded, not looking away from the screen. Seismic monitors are picking up a concentrated cluster. Shallow tremors, all within 5 miles of the caldera. Pressures building. Still not at evacuation levels, but it's happening, Clara finished for him. Yeah, he said. It's happening. She walked away in silence, notebook in hand, when a sharp hissing sound made her stop. A geyser, normally gentle and routine, erupted with sudden force, sending a tower of steam into the cold air, higher than usual. Across the basin, another did the same. Then another. The rhythm was off. Everything was waking up. Clara turned her gaze back to the bear formation. They were still there. Unflinching. But now, different. She noticed some had shifted stances, legs widened, bodies lower to the ground. A few had begun to move slightly, not leaving their spots but preparing. Tension ran through them like a taut wire. Their eyes still pointed in the same direction. But now, there was a readiness. The time for stillness was ending. Clara scribbled notes with fingers numb from the cold. 6:47 a.m., multiple geysers erupting out of sync. Gas emissions visibly increased. Bears remain but are no longer in complete stasis. Signs of alert readiness. Something is building. She closed her notebook and looked out at the land that had once been just a backdrop for her work. Not today. Today, it was the main character. And it was starting to speak in tremors, in geysers, in instincts too old for science to explain. Clara whispered into the wind, though she didn't know who she was talking to. I hear you. And for the first time, she felt the land whisper back. Cale's departure. The morning sun broke through the low clouds in fragmented shafts, casting golden light across the frost-tipped grass and misty treetops. Clara sat on a fold-out stool near the southern edge of the overlook, her camera resting on her lap, unused. The bears were changing. They weren't leaving, not yet, but their formation had shifted. The once perfectly spaced line had softened, loosened. Some bears had begun drifting back toward the trees, slowly, calmly, as if dismissing themselves from a post long held. Others lingered, still facing southeast, but no longer frozen in place. And Cale. Cale stood alone. The great silver-backed grizzly had moved down from his original position near the geyser and now occupied a small rise beside the highway. From where Clara watched, his silhouette cut against the pale sky like a monument carved from the mountain itself. His head turned, not to scan, not to flinch, but to observe, with purpose. She noticed something different in his posture. Not weakness. Not fear. Resignation. His mission, whatever it had been, was nearing its end. One by one, the others peeled away from the line, disappearing silently into the forest as if dismissed by some unspoken order. It wasn't panic. It wasn't retreat. It was release. Clara lifted her camera, not to document, but to honor. She focused on Cale as he stood in profile, the steam from a nearby hot spring curling around his frame. He didn't look toward her. He didn't need to. Somehow, she knew he was aware of her presence. A breeze moved across the ridge, carrying with it the scent of pine, damp earth, and a trace of sulfur. The forest rustled gently for the first time in days. Then, as the last bear vanished into the trees behind him, Cale did something Clara would never forget. He turned. Slowly. Deliberately. His massive head turned back over his shoulder, eyes sweeping the space behind him. Toward the road. Toward the humans. Toward her. It was a single glance. Maybe 2 seconds. But in that moment, Clara felt it. Not danger. Not warning. Recognition. He looked at her not as a threat or an observer, but as a participant. A witness. Someone who had heard what others hadn't. Seen what others couldn't. And then, without a sound, Cale turned forward again, took one step, then another, and melted into the trees, his silverback swallowed by the shadows. The road was empty. No paw prints. No signs of chaos. Just the gentle hiss of thermal vents and the long, slow exhale of a wilderness that had held its breath for days. Clara lowered her camera, hands trembling. She knew something had shifted, beneath the ground, yes.
But more importantly, within her.
And Cale's final glance? That would follow her forever. Reflection, the meaning of the warning. Clara didn't leave Yellowstone right away. Even after the last of the bears vanished into the forest and the tremor subsided, she remained at the edge of Lamar Valley, notebook in hand, staring at the road where Cale had once stood. It looked like any other highway now, just blacktop winding through trees and open grassland. Ordinary. Familiar. But to Clara, it would never be the same. She replayed the past 3 days in her mind like a dream that refused to fade, the first silent gathering, the tremors beneath her boots, the shared stillness between predator and prey, and that final glance from Cale. It was all too precise, too deeply felt to be a coincidence.
This wasn't about fear.
It was about connection. She thought back to the ranger's words, "They're not doing anything. They're being." That simple line had echoed louder than any scientific explanation she'd read since. Because no report, no press release, no data set could fully explain what they'd witnessed out there. The seismic activity was minor, yes. The tremors, non-destructive. But what Clara had seen, what the world had seen, went far beyond geology. The bears had known. They'd felt the shift before it appeared on any monitor. They'd gathered not to flee, but to stand, to face something, to hold space. And somehow, in doing so, they had drawn every living thing nearby into a shared awareness. It had become a collective stillness. A sacred pause. The more Clara thought about it, the more she understood, it wasn't just a warning about the land. It was a mirror. A message. We've grown used to ignoring the natural rhythms around us, tuning out the subtle shifts, brushing off the quiet cues. But animals don't do that. They don't argue with instinct. They don't debate whether a breeze feels wrong or a silence feels deep. They respond. They adjust. They listen. The wild had shown them what listening looked like. And now Clara found herself wondering, how many warnings had we already missed? How many Cales had stood silent on our roads while we drove past, distracted by noise and deadlines? She didn't have all the answers. No one did. But she knew this, something ancient had stirred, and for once, the world had noticed. And for a few fleeting days, people paused. They watched. They wondered. And maybe, just maybe, they remembered that this world doesn't belong to us alone. That wisdom isn't always written in books or measured on screens. Sometimes, it stands in silence. Sometimes, it stares back. And sometimes, if we're lucky enough to be paying attention, it teaches us how to feel the earth again, not as tourists, not as observers, but as part of it. As kin. Clara closed her notebook and looked out across the valley. Cale was gone. But his message remained. Legacy of the wild. Months later, the footage still rippled across the internet. Clips of Cale standing alone on the road. Drone shots of the bear formation curving through Yellowstone's valley like a living net. Thousands of reposts. Millions of views. News anchors, podcasters, even high school classrooms, everyone had their theory. But for Clara, it wasn't about the headlines anymore. It was about what came after. Cale's final image, a single frame of him silhouetted in the morning light, had turned back toward the world he'd silently addressed, had become iconic. The photo appeared in ranger stations, conservation centers, and environmental conferences around the country. Some people called him the Watcher. Others just called him the Reminder. And Clara? She didn't sell the photo. She never would. It belonged to something bigger than credit or clicks. Instead, she used it, printed on the cover of a short documentary she released months after the event, titled When the Wild Warned the World. It wasn't flashy. No dramatic voiceover. Just silence. Slow cuts of the bears. Shots of empty roads. Footage of the geysers shifting, of elk standing still, of birds returning to the trees when it was over. It didn't tell people what to believe. It just asked them to watch. The documentary became a quiet phenomenon, shown in small theaters, community centers, college campuses. People cried. Not because of what happened, but because of how it made them feel. Seen. Humbled. Connected. In the months that followed, Clara noticed a shift, not everywhere, not instantly, but in places that mattered. School kids wrote letters to park rangers asking how they could help protect wildlife. Hikers left their Bluetooth speakers at home. Tourists paused longer at overlooks, not just to take pictures, but to listen. Even the rangers talked differently. Jake Morrison, the no-nonsense ranger who'd stood beside Clara when the first tremors hit, now taught a new segment during his visitor briefings. He called it Reading the Land. Watch the animals, he'd say. They're not here for decoration. They're our first alert system. Our best teachers. If you see them standing still, maybe you should, too. Clara kept coming back to Yellowstone. Not with a tight schedule. Not chasing the next viral moment. She returned with a quieter purpose, just to be present. To feel the rhythms again. To listen in case the earth had more to say. And every now and then, she thought she saw movement at the edge of the trees. A shadow with silver in its fur. A figure too large to mistake. Never close. Never for long. But always just long enough. A reminder that the wild doesn't need to shout. It just needs us to stop long enough to hear it. Because its legacy isn't in earthquakes or eruptions, it's in the stillness that speaks when everything else goes quiet. And in the hearts that are brave enough to listen. The story of Cale and the silent bears of Yellowstone wasn't just about animals behaving strangely. It was about something far more profound, about how deeply connected we still are to the rhythms of the earth, even when we forget. In a world full of noise, movement, and constant distraction, the bears taught us that silence can be powerful. That stillness can be wise. That when something feels different in the air, in the ground, in our bones, it's okay to stop. To pay attention. To trust what we feel, not just what we see. Their gathering was a reminder, nature doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers. And in those whispers, there are warnings. Truths. Wisdom that's older than anything we've built. We live faster than ever. But maybe we don't need to keep up. Maybe we need to slow down. So here's the challenge, from Paw Prints and Stories. Next time you're outside, on a hike, in your backyard, even just walking to your car, pause. Listen. Look. What's the wild trying to tell you? What have you been too busy to notice? If this story stirred something inside you, you belong here, with us. Subscribe to Paw Prints and Stories and walk alongside a community that believes animals aren't just part of the world. They're part of us. We're listening now. Are you?